break the rules. That's what I've learned after studying my favorite cinematographers. None of them seem to follow any particular rule. Today we're going to take a look at some films and TV shows and break down what makes these shots so good. In this video, we're going to discuss camera angles, lighting techniques, and some other really cool tips that can help you guys take your cinematography to the next level. And when you take a look at scenes from a film, there is a lot that goes into creating a cinematic shot. One major factor to creating cinematic images is paying attention to the direction of light. Where is the light coming from in your scene? And how can you light your space to make it feel real and believable? Taking a look at this scene from Elysium, you can tell that there's a very strong window light in this wide shot. So when they cut to this close-up shot, our brains automatically start to feel like this is all caused by a very natural daylight look. But if we pay close attention to this shot right here, you can obviously see that there's a hard edge light on camera left and some very intentional negative fill on camera right. And we know this because if you cut to this shot right here, you could see the light on this side of his face wrap around a lot softer and a lot more. And then on this side of his face, the shadow is a lot less harsh. But in our minds, as we're watching the film, we make sense of this scene by thinking that all of this is being motivated by that little window light. And they do something very similar in this scene from Top Gun. As you can see, Tom Cruise has some very directional light on this side of his face. And on the other side of his face, it's almost in complete shadow. Now when they show the other character in this scene who's talking, they allow us to see this window light on the left side of the frame again, allowing you to believe that all of this light in the room is coming from this one window source. Now what they probably did was punch a bunch of tungsten lights through these windows to emulate that sunset interior look. Now this is how they motivated this light, by using natural sources in a room. But how do cinematographers sometimes break the rules? If we take a look at this shot from Last Night in Soho, there is nothing in this scene that makes us believe that all these different colored lights are on his face. Now we're stepping into a more stylized look that cinematographers tend to use on projects like music videos. Not every scene needs to have a strong, motivated, realistic lighting. Sometimes scenes could be more stylized to fit the mood or the theme of the film. The cinematography from Euphoria really does a great job at this. They'll get extremely creative with the lighting and the cinematography in the scenes, and as a viewer, you don't really question it so much because it's part of the overall story and it's part of the film. So when you're thinking about lighting for your film, I think it's really important to try to look at the space and understand what's going on to motivate the lighting in your scene. But I also think it's important to understand the story that you're trying to tell and try to figure out whether you're trying to create a realistic lighting environment or if you're going for a more stylized look. Are there big natural windows that you could start to motivate the light from? Is there a street lamp? Are there practical lights in your scene that are going to help you motivate the lighting? And that'll help you start to understand what direction these lights should be coming from. And not only direction, but also the quality of lights that you should be using. That's the next topic that we're going to talk about, the quality of light. And I don't mean how cheap or how expensive your light is. What I'm mainly talking about is how soft or how harsh your light is. And there is definitely a time and place for both. If you take a look at some of these sunset interior shots, this is a great example of hard lighting. Hard light, like the sun, creates sharp shadows that outlines or silhouettes objects. They're also great for creating an edge or a hair light on your character to outline them and separate them from the background. And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum, and that is soft light. Typically, it's created from a very big source of light that is heavily diffused. A great natural interpretation of this would be when you have a very cloudy day. You have the sun hitting the earth, but then you have all the clouds diffusing that light, creating a very soft, balanced light. And if you notice in these images right here, the shadows are very soft, and there's a very gradual roll-off from bright areas to dark areas of the face. And this is a good indication that the cinematographer is using a big soft source of light. And most of the time, your decision should be made, again, going back to the motivation of light in a particular scene. If you have big, huge light sources, then chances are the shadow roll-off in your scene should feel a little less harsh. And maybe your scene is motivated by a lamp lighting. That means that your key light might be a little bit harder and a little bit smaller of a light source to help create those realistic shadows, like in this scene right here. A lot of this light is coming from this practical lamp light, and even though there's no way that little lamp light is lighting her entire face, our brains tend to make sense of that for this scene. Which brings us to our next topic, and that is the use of practical lighting. So far, we've talked about all the lights that are off camera that help create the mood and the ambience of a shot. But an extremely important aspect of lighting are the practical lights in a scene. And this could be things like lamps, light bulbs, street lights, neon signs, or any other light that could come from an object in your scene. Take a look at these practical lights from the movie Teen Spirit. Yes, they're definitely cool and they're definitely helping create depth and visual interest to the background, but they're also playing a key role in outlining our character. And taking a look at this shot from Blade Runner, the scene is lit primarily with practical lights that you see in the frame. Our main character is silhouetted and being backlit by lights from the building and the street, as well as adding visual interest to the overall frame in the background. But a lot like sunlight, practical lights can help you motivate the lights in your scene. Let's take a look at this scene from Fight Club. These cyan blue tube lights are motivating the key light on our character's face. But one thing our cinematographer snuck in there was this little blue edge light on this side of our subject's face. And this is another great example of breaking the rules, because in this frame, there's nothing telling us how or why this blue edge light is there. But it's a really nice touch to the frame, and it separates our subject just a little bit from the background, creating this checkerboard effect from light to dark to light and back to dark. And the checkerboard lighting effect is a great way to create depth and visual interest in your scene. A great example of this is this scene from 007. As you can see, going from right to left of the frame, we start off with a dark part of the frame, then there's a light part, and then it's back to dark, and then it's back to light, and then it's back to dark again. And if you start to pay attention, you'll notice that this particular technique is used over and over again in filmmaking and in cinematography. Now, the last tip that I have for you guys is something a lot less obvious than anything else that we talked about so far, and that is reflections. Using mirrors is a great way to create more space and depth in your shot. It can make a space feel bigger than it is, and it could also be a great storytelling tool. In this shot from Drive, it's used to show one of our character's reactions to what he's talking about, and it kind of gives our camera a really cool way of showing two perspectives with one over-the-shoulder shot. But mirrors aren't the only way to use reflections. A lot of directors and DPs like to use wet surfaces like city streets or even big huge sets with a bunch of water in them to create these vast reflective surfaces. And the reason why they do this is because it's great for reflecting light and adding visual interest and depth to your shot. And I know that there's a lot of stuff that we went over today, guys, and I know that cinematography, especially when you're just starting out, can be extremely overwhelming. And that's why me and my team have been producing this documentary filmmaking course. And a large part of this course is centered around cinematography, where we break down different lighting techniques to shoot things like interviews, commercials, and films. So if you guys are interested in that, I'll leave a link in the description down below, and you guys will be the first to be notified as soon as that course drops. I want to thank you guys for stopping in and hanging out with me, talking about cinematography and all these really cool films. And yeah, man, I'll see you guys next week. Deuces.